Tell me about the droid.
He's a BB unit with a selenium drive and a thermal hyperscan vindicator.
It's carrying a section of a navigational chart. And we have the rest. Recovered from the archives of the Empire, but we need the last piece. And somehow you convinced the droid to show it to you. You. The scavenger. You know I can take whatever I want. You're so lonely. So afraid to leave. At night, desperate to sleep. You imagine an ocean. I see it. I see the island. And Han Solo. You feel like he's the father you never had. He would have disappointed you.
Get out of my head.
I know you've seen the map. It's in there. And now you'll give it to me. Don't be afraid. I feel it too.
I'm not giving you anything.
We'll see.
Welcome, Masters and Padawans, to episode 580 of Full of Sith. Another episode brought to you live from Indiana Comic-Con with myself, Bryan Young, a host of the show. And joining me live is going to be Holly Fry, the other redoubtable host of the show, and some other special guests that I will leave as a surprise for the recording. You're going to hear them all introduce themselves, like I said, live, with a packed audience. And this was a lot of fun. We got to talk to a bunch of folks about Force Awakens after 10 years, which is really hard to imagine, and just sort of reminisce about what it was like waiting for the movie and experiencing it for the first time, and the trailers and the hype leading up to it, and sort of what it's been like over the last 10 years. So without further ado, here it is, live from Indiana Comic-Con, 10 years of The Force Awakens. Okay, welcome, Masters and Padawans. We're going to be talking about 10 years of The Force Awakens. I'll introduce myself very briefly, and then we'll have our other illustrious panelists introduce themselves. My name's Bryan Young. I do a lot of stuff in the Star Wars realm. I co-host the Full of Sith podcast with Holly Fry here to my left, and I also write a lot about Star Wars for Slash Film and a number of other websites, including StarWars.com for almost 10 years and Star Wars Insider, and currently I'm writing all of the Star Wars movie trading cards for Topps, which is
I love that.
Very
interesting,
cool.
Fun.
So cool. I sound so uncool by comparison.
That's not true. You're Holly Fry.
I'm Holly Fry. I co-host Full of Sith with Bryan. Star Wars is my fun side thing because my main job is hosting podcasts for the iHeartRadio network. I host Stuff You Missed in History Class and Criminalia, which is a true crime history podcast with cocktails. But I also, on occasion, get pulled in to host and moderate stuff for ILM Immersive and occasionally Disney Parks because I spend a lot of time in Galaxy's Edge.
I don't think anybody spends more time in Galaxy's Edge than maybe
it's a little
you.
problem.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out. My name's Clayton Sandell. I spent a lot of years in television news at ABC and at Scripps News. Always was a Star Wars fan, and I credit The Force Awakens with sort of getting me into the world of doing news reports, features, and stories about all things Star Wars, a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. And I've been really lucky to co-author 3 Star Wars books at this point: Star Wars Timelines, a Return of the Jedi visual archive, and another one on the Phantom Menace, which is coming out in September. And I also do some writing for IndustrialLightandMagic.com and Skywalker Sound, doing just some behind-the-scenes features. So in the next couple of weeks, look for a big story on behind the scenes of Skeleton Crew, visual effects.
Cannot wait.
A lot of fun stuff.
So I think one of the biggest things to talk about was the idea that, for one, there was a time when we all thought there was going to be episodes 7, 8, and 9, and then for a long time there was no hope of a 7, 8, and 9. Yeah. And I think maybe we should start there. Because I think for when George Lucas was doing press for Return of the Jedi, there was a lot of press Mark Hamill specifically was doing about, George said, 20, 30 years from now, I'll be doing the Obi-Wan role, I'll be passing the torch. When we do 7, 8, and 9, and then as we got further and further into the 80s, George Lucas was like, nope, 6 is it. I'm going to do episode 1, 2, and 3. And as we got into Revenge of the Sith, it was like, nope, we are done here. And the animated series really, that was where he was focusing his energy, and so it really came as a shock when they said, oh, we're making more movies.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, place us back in that time.
I mean, I am one of the few people in the room that's old enough to remember a time on Earth when there wasn't Star Wars. Right, the first one came out when I was very little. It came out on my birthday. It felt like a gift just for me. But then, I am a little bit older than you, so I lived through like that period where we just thought there was nothing else coming, an occasional trickle of books. So even by the time we had gotten through the prequels and it was like, there won't be any more, there was part of me that was like, maybe. I've done that dance before. I remember that there will never be more, and then it came back.
Yeah, I am, I think, even older than you. And I remember sitting in the theater watching the lights come up after Return of the Jedi was over. Sorry about that. And just, like Bryan was saying, like we had heard sort of that maybe there was going to be more, but then maybe there wasn't. And so there was really, we entered the dark times is what we did. Yeah, from 1983 to... I was going to say 1999, but we did get a little bit of hope when the special editions came out, which was awesome.
Even before then, when they did the THX release in '95, they were saying this is the last time you're going to see the originals because there is more coming.
Right.
So we had '95 was sort of that big frenzy.
But I was never really into a lot of the books and the comics that kind of came out and sustained. It was a thin gruel that sustained Star Wars fans for a long time, and so I was mostly a movie guy. But yeah, it was definitely a dark time.
It's interesting when you think about the timelines, though. 95 was when we had the THX release, which is when we had. The original One Last Time, and it came out on VHS and Laserdisc.
Right.
And within 10 years, we had Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
And then within 10 years of that, we had Force Awakens. And now we're only 10 years after that.
Yeah.
And it seems, this is also the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith, which is really hard to think that we only got 10 years away from Revenge of the Sith before we got Force Awakens.
Yeah, it seems longer. I don't know if it's because so much of that time was filled with people grousing. That expands time a little bit, right? But it's a more compressed timeline than we even realize. Even as we're coming up on, the 50th of the start of it all, I'm simultaneously like, are we sure that's all that it's been? And also, has it really been that long?
Yeah, it's hard for me to reconcile, like, this is 26 years since Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
Because Phantom Menace was the one, I just graduated high school, and it was, I know.
It always cracks me up when Bryan says that, because I went to Phantom Menace with my husband. So I'm like, you're so cute.
Yeah, I know. So actually, I want to play a video, and this is the first trailer. This is the first moving images we saw of Force Awakens. This came out in 2014, so this came out 11 years ago. And I want to get your reaction. I want everybody to be able to see this as well. This is the first trailer. And I want to get your reaction of what it felt like seeing that the first time, but also what it's like looking back on it now, because sometimes trailers, we'll watch them a lot right in the lead up to the movie and then never really look at them again. So what does that look like now? And for everybody in the audience, too. So if you want to play the 2014 one.
There has been an awakening. Have you felt it?
Yeah, I get the hairs standing on the back of my neck all over
100%.
again. Everybody else get that? Especially when the Falcon comes out.
What's amazing about that teaser, though, is that, like, you ask somebody, well, what's your favorite part of it? And it is truly impossible to pick because every single thing, the rolling droid, who
It's
just
BB-8
went?
for me. It's BB-8.
BB-8, the lightsaber with the cross hilts, all of the Falcon, of course, showing up at the end. There was no part of that trailer that wasn't sort of instantly iconic. We were seeing stormtroopers, but they weren't exactly the same stormtroopers.
Yeah.
They were, and there's a guy who's not Luke or Han with their helmet off, with a stormtrooper helmet off, and it was every part of it was.
I remember going to see it because they announced, okay, we're dropping it, and if you go see a movie at these times, for these times, you could go see it on the big screen for the first time. And this was, even 10 years ago, social media was still ruining all of our lives. So I had to turn my phone off so that I wouldn't be tempted to look at anyone else's reaction or all of the thousands of screenshots of it.
Yeah.
And B, that I wouldn't be tempted to just go look at it on my phone. Mm-hmm. And I went to the movies to watch it on the big screen for the first time, and I was just like this pile of tears.
Oh, that's incredible.
And then I immediately, as soon as the credits rolled on the end of the movie, I immediately started watching it again just to try to soak it in. But Andy Serkis is a perfect voice to sort of reintroduce you to the universe and what might be happening, and the idea that the title had a meaning, right? Like that the Force might be awakening, which is something that I don't think the movie paid off as well as it did until later, right? Like the title about the Force awakening, it didn't really come into focus until the end as much.
Mm-hmm. Well, and part of that is, I will say this trailer is a masterclass in media tantalization.
Yes.
Pitch perfect in every selection of what they show and don't show, how they punctuate all of that with music and sound. It really is as though a psychologist went, how can we manipulate people to feel things in 90 seconds?
Exactly. And I think you're absolutely right, because what they show you are all things that you're familiar with.
Yes.
A droid, an X-Wing, although we've never seen an X-Wing flying over water like that.
Yeah.
Stormtrooper armor, all of these things, a lightsaber, all of these things that we know very well from the Star Wars galaxy, but they're just a little bit different. But tying it all together is that John Williams score, and it's just like, ooh, okay, here we go.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I bring this up with some frequency because I really yearn to one day locate this person. Do you all remember there was a dude who got a tattoo, like right after this came out, of the rolling droid, and we didn't even know his name yet? And I just remember the internet being like, man, you are a ding-dong. Like, we don't know what this is. But this is the rare case where that was like kind of a great gamble. And I hope he still has and loves that tattoo.
Yeah.
I mean, did anybody not love BB-8 after that?
Oh, I love him so much.
The meme, they see me rolling, they hate me.
Yeah.
There you go. But who frame by framed through the trailer, like multiple times? Yeah.
I felt, I felt like I'd given that up by then because I felt really burned out by that with the prequels.
Wow.
I still do it.
I know. I try, now my philosophy with the trailers is I don't try to seek them out. Like, if I happen to see them, I will watch them, but I'm trying not to go over them repeatedly. Like, I've only watched the trailer for Andor Season 2, twice, because I saw them, I saw it once on the Oscars.
I've only seen it, twice today.
Yeah, I know.
She's frame by framing it right
But
now as we look.
I think part of that is reflective of the way you take in Star Wars versus the way other people do, right? When I'm going second by second, I'm looking for the weird stuff in the background that I know is never going to be a big thing. I just want to see all the kind of flotsam and jetsam, because that's what I tend to gravitate to in the movies anyway. The cantina remains my obsession.
And I'm going, oh, here's the story.
Right, you want the big arcing story points,
Yeah.
and so it feels not the same to you in terms of joy.
Yeah.
To step through the trailer.
And also, and I assume we're going to see the other trailer, but also,
Yeah.
these trailers oftentimes they sort of have their own self-contained story in a way that doesn't always match up with exactly what's in the film, but it's still fun to sort of absorb it as like a pre-story in a way.
It's interesting too, looking at this, how much they showed us. Most of it's from the beginning of the movie. Most of it's on Jakku. With the exceptions of, there is the X-Wing stuff from Takadana, which is just striking visually,
Right.
and then the one shot of Kylo Ren on Starkiller Base, completely out of context, with him with his back turned, right? They're teasing us with stuff. If you come to the Empire Strikes Back panel on Sunday that we're doing, you'll see the original trailer for Empire Strikes Back, and you're going to go, they gave everything away. There's nothing left. How did they not figure everything out? There's everything there.
Yeah.
But they played this one much closer to their vest.
Yeah, they absolutely. Yeah, they did.
Let's play the second trailer, because this one debuted at Star Wars Celebration in Anaheim. And this was a really big moment. This one, all three of us were in the room for that, right?
Yeah.
No, I
weren't
have a
in the room.
kooky. I was covering Celebration Anaheim for work, for How Stuff Works. We were going, and so it was me and my camera crew, and we were in our shuttle from the airport to our hotel when it dropped, because we couldn't get in early and we had a delay in Atlanta. And so we're having the discussion of, do we watch it on our phones in this van right now, or should we wait? So it just makes me giggle whenever anybody talks about it.
What'd you decide?
I watched it on my phone in that van. There was I can't wait. My camera and sound guys were like, nah, we'll wait and watch it on your phone at the hotel. I don't know why they wanted to wait for that, but. And then we just watched it a million times on laptops.
I had to, so I watched it in the crowd with everyone, and then I get a call from Matt Martin, who is on the Lucasfilm Story Group, but he also, for some reason at Celebration, they drag him in to, produce the Star Wars live streams, and he goes, hey, we've got a group of Star Wars journalists that are going to be frame by framing it on the live stream, and I need an adult there. Can you help with that? So I ended up on the live stream doing the frame by frame with them. And
Your favorite thing.
yeah, no, it was really interesting. The bizarre theories that they came up with I was like shooting down, like, no, that's not confirmed. No, that's not confirmed. And I realized at that moment, like, why they called me to ask to do that, because they were all film journalists.
That's a weird scenario, though, because you want to be supportive of everyone's excitement and not a killjoy.
Yeah.
But also, you don't want people to develop unrealistic expectations of what they think something is.
Yep.
Because that's how you get people that end up walking out of a movie angry.
Does that happen?
What? That's a tricky position. I don't envy you that one.
Okay, so let's look at the second trailer, and this is we'll look at this one, and then we can open it, I think, to some questions.
Yeah.
If anybody has
Absolutely,
questions. If not, we'll just keep talking.
The Force is strong in my family. My father has it. I have it. My sister has it. You have that power too.
Chewie, we're home.
I think what I love about this one is that it leans on a couple of my favorite other Star Wars trailers. It opens up with that long shot with the same music cues as the Phantom Menace A trailer.
Yeah.
And it also, it stops, it opens with the the Luke narration the same way the Revenge of the Sith trailer opened with the Obi-Wan narration. And I realize I sound really nerdy right now about
What?
all of the
This
different
is
cuts,
just now hitting you?
the different cuts of the different trailers of the different Star Wars movies. But also that at this point, they'd already released Claudia Gray's Lost Stars, so that when we cut across to that giant Star Destroyer, we realize that that's the Inflictor, that's the Star Destroyer that we read that story about. And so there's additional story being told there because of the way they released the stories that we'd been getting. Because this was released not many months after they'd made the announcement. April 2014 was when they made the announcement that they were unifying the canon and moving everything published prior to April 2014 into the Legends timeline.
Yeah.
So Lost Stars was one of those that first batch, and that gave us some of that context for the Battle of Jakku.
Yeah.
Yeah, that opening scene, I just remember being in that room and the electricity and the cheering when that camera pans over and people realize that was not a mountain in the background. That was a crashed Star Destroyer, and people just lost it. And it just went from there. I mean, we were off to the races, and then, of course, Han and Chewie at the end. I started to get choked up just now watching it. You should have seen me in the room. I was a bawling idiot.
Yeah, it's interesting that they opted for a little bit of deception with this trailer because the Luke narration led everybody to believe that Luke was going to be in the movie. And so I have debated many times over the last decade about, like, was that a really, really critical misstep in terms of marketing? Like, did that fundamentally end up hurting the reception of the film because people just felt like they kind of got bait and switched a little bit? I mean, I love the movie. I think it's super duper fun, but I do often go like, did this actually start some problems?
But I guess that makes me, on the same token, like, it's Luke from Return of the Jedi, right? And I think people know that's Luke from Return of the Jedi the same way they used Alec Guinness in the Revenge of the Sith trailer, and nobody's going like, did it hurt them that Alec Guinness wasn't in Revenge of the Sith? And I know Obi-Wan is in that, so
it
he
feels
is
different to me.
there, but at the point where the opening crawl of Force Awakens, and this is something that, like, in 10 years of Force Awakens, in the 2 years between Force Awakens and Last Jedi, I was always very confused by people going, who's Snoke? Who are Rey's parents? These are the questions I want to know. Who's Rey? Because the very first thing you read when you open up Force Awakens and the crawl starts is Luke Skywalker has vanished. And the very last thing is that Luke didn't show up to save Han, and he looks sad when she hands him or tries to hand him the lightsaber. And that becomes the central narrative mystery of the story, because that's what it starts on, that's what it ends on, and that's the question The Last Jedi needs to answer. Whatever that movie becomes 2 years from now, that where did Luke go, why didn't he show up, and what happened is the central mystery of the story, and that people weren't asking that question. I don't think that the marketing did that when you look at how the conversation went.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you. I think there's space for all of those questions, but I do think part of the problem is that it almost felt a little bit, in terms of ground to tread, like nobody even wanted to venture there because they already felt like they kind of didn't have any information to start with. You know what I mean? You have just outlined everything we knew about Luke in that movie. And so at that point, I think it, rather than opening doors to more questions for a lot of people, it was like, well, I didn't get what I thought I was going to in terms of Luke Skywalker, so I'm going to focus on what I did get and what I need to figure out from that.
But I guess, I think you, viewers were less savvy than I think they were trying to give them credit for. Or maybe J.J. Abrams was a less savvy filmmaker than he thought he was. In that, I think that he gave viewers enough credit to say the central arc of Skywalkers, when you look at Attack of the Clones and you have Anakin go, my loved ones are in danger, I don't care what my masters say, I'm going to take off and I'm going to go save them no matter how this damages the galaxy, and he does that to go save his mom, and he ends up killing a whole bunch of people on Tatooine. And then we see Luke do the same thing in Empire, where he says, no, I don't care, I'm going to go save them, and he takes off and goes to Cloud City and opts to try to kill himself rather than join Darth Vader, and then ends up in the next movie on Tatooine killing a bunch of people. Just because he'd rather do that than pay his buddy's credit card debt. You know, that seemed more simple. And that he's veering to the dark side as well, so that when Force Awakens opens and Han shows up in the mentor role, because in Phantom Menace and in A New Hope, the whiz kid mechanic on the desert planet gets strong in the Force, gets picked up by the mentor, who ends up, killed by the red lightsaber. Han shows up to do that because Luke is vanished, and then when Luke doesn't show up to save Han, the question is why.
Right, but I think I don't think anything that you're saying is wrong. But I think it's two modalities of thought, right? You are wanting to look at it from the overarching Skywalker thing, and I don't think it is wrong either for people to instead embrace what they do have, which is Rey's story, and want to know about that.
I'm not saying that's wrong either. I'm just saying the film says in the film, Luke Skywalker has vanished.
Yes.
Why? And that's the question the film asks. Right off the bat.
Right.
There are other questions too.
Well, exactly.
Do you guys have any questions?
Clayton,
Yeah.
tie break.
I wanted that question answered earlier, and I was in the camp of I thought it was a bit of a bait and switch. Yeah, that was. I thought.
I'm not saying it wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Fair enough.
I'm saying, looking at what we got, that was how I had to come to terms with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fair.
Which is why I loved The Last Jedi so much. Because it finally answered those questions in the most satisfactory way possible.
Absolutely. What do you guys think? Any questions?
Does anyone have any questions?
Thoughts?
When the very first trailer came out, did any of you guys get jump scared by Finn popping?
Yeah, I mean, like, I was, like, my favorite seats in the theater are, like, the third row from the screen, and when that music spiked and Finn popped up from the screen, yes, my heart skipped a beat, and I was just like, wow, that was really intense.
I think I was more jump scared by my husband going, "Who's that?" Like I was like, we'll find out.
Yeah.
That was the interesting thing about that too, because before that trailer came out, we didn't know who anybody's part was. If you look at a lot of the fan art that was coming out before then, like you were seeing, it was really interesting because you were seeing like fan art of Ben Solo, like dressed, like they were just photoshopping him on old Han Solo pictures, and they were photoshopping Donald Gleason, who ended up playing Hux, like as a Jedi, and like as like Ben Solo kind of or Ben Skywalker from the old Legends canon, and Luke was there and everything, and people just didn't know who was playing what, so that when we got that trailer, like nobody knew, like it was like, wait, he's a stormtrooper? Like we thought he was gonna be something else, and wait, Rey's like just a desert person or not even Rey, it was like Daisy Ridley's character, a desert person on a speeder, and did we see, was that Adam Driver? I don't know. Who's that person with the lightsaber?
Yeah.
I think we need an entire extra panel just to talk about what the heck happened to Constable Zuvio.
Listen, the
Where's my Zuvio people?
unsung hero of Jakku.
Because that was the only, like, there were so many Zuvio action figures on the shelf.
I did a whole, like, one of the sites I was writing for, they had me do a whole spread about characters that were going to be important based on all of the media that came out beforehand.
Yeah.
And I pitched a whole spread on how central Constable Zuvio might be based on the action figure, all of the stories he featured in, everything. Like, who remembers all the stories about Constable Zuvio? Anybody?
They were great.
How many of you have a Constable Zuvio action figure?
Yeah, talk about a bait and switch.
He's not even, if there is a bait and switch, it's Constable Zuvio.
Yeah.
Zuvio.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think I'm talking out of turn to say that even Pablo Hidalgo, who's doing panels here this weekend, in one of the panels I was in where he was talking about preparing the visual guide for that movie, originally there had been a bigger Zuvio image that got pulled, and so it just tickles me to no end that somewhere out there is this amazing alternate universe where it's a Zuvio story.
That's pretty great.
And I want to find it.
There's probably other cuts. I think it's interesting that J.J. Abrams, his method of making movies is to continue cutting and recutting and refining all the way up until release, which is sort of the opposite of Rian Johnson, right? Rian Johnson, it was reported that he had picture lock like 6 months before release of the movie. I don't know if it was actually 6 months, but it was well in advance of the release of the movie. But J.J. Abrams was doing reshoots and trimming everything down. So at whatever point marketing and licensing was doing stuff, Zuvio probably had a prominent role in there. But we'll never know.
We'll never know.
Have either of you been to the Zoovium?
Is this Martin's?
Yes.
There
is a museum dedicated to Zuvio outside of London that if you go to their website, you can sign up for a virtual tour, and I highly recommend it. And that's all I'm going to say about it.
I did not know that. Maybe I did know that, yeah.
You have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts on, or I guess, how do you think the series would have played out had the books not been turned into the Legends and then that shift between 2014 onward?
I think the movies would have turned out worse if they didn't shift it from Legends.
I'm trying to think about how they would even tackle all that. Because, there was so much, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. There was so much material in Legends, much of which contradicted each other, some of which was really wackadoodle, which is not a pejorative. It just was like very outside the box of what we normally considered as Star Wars. And I just think that's kind of like telling storytellers to come up with an idea while simultaneously, hanging 50-pound weights from their every available space. It's just a lot that will be a hindrance rather than a help. But we have seen things from Legends get cherry-picked and added into the current canon all the time.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing to remember is that they were developing those movies before the sale to Disney. And George was the one developing those movies, and George has never cared about what was in Legends or what wasn't. And so the whole Luke disappears and is a grumpy hermit on an island, and Han and Leia's son has turned to the dark side, and there's this scrappy girl who turns into a Jedi. Those are all part of what George had been developing, and none of it fit with what had gone on in the Legends timeline.
Yeah.
And part of the reason George had started developing that was because he knew he was going to sell, and there was no way Disney was just going to buy Star Wars at the price I think he wanted to sell without something new coming, because the price inflated significantly with him going, I'm developing 3 new Star Wars movies, and we're going to sell. That inflated the price significantly. And yeah, George didn't care, so they were going to have to come up with a solution for the Legends anyway. And I think a lot of people unfairly blame Disney for stuff that they had absolutely nothing to do with, and I think they unfairly blame Lucasfilm for a bunch of stuff they had nothing to do with, when it's George Lucas did that, and he'd been doing that the whole time, right? Look at the Karen Travis Mandalorian novels versus the Clone Wars. Look at how every time the prequels came out, they would start shifting stuff in the novels because none of it lined up with anything in the EU. I found there's so much in there. So that was happening one way or the other. And who would you get to direct that movie, right? If you hand an A-list filmmaker and say, we want you to direct a new Star Wars movie, and here are 300 books that you have to work around, who's actually going to take that job? We'd never get a movie.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point. I credit the movie, too, with also just reigniting my own fandom. It was like the fandom reawakens. I was always a Star Wars fan, but when that movie came out, I think that, or even just the announcement that it was coming out, was such a fun, positive time when people were super excited to see it come back. And the thing that I saw the start of, which led me to both of you was sort of the rise of all of Star Wars podcasts, and people were talking about it more. Twitter was now more of a thing, and we were all sort of finding each other then, and for that I am eternally grateful, because I met some of the nicest, friendliest, greatest Star Wars fans, fellow fans that way, and I don't know that without the films that would have happened. Force Awakens specifically.
Yeah. I also just think Force Awakens is a super fun movie. It's a great romp. When you're having a bad day, kick that off, and by the end of it, you're like, everything's fine. I'm gonna eat a cookie and go on with life and feel pretty great about the day.
I feel that way with any of the sequel films, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, really, I mean, there's not a Star Wars movie that doesn't make me feel that way.
That's true. I just there's something very joyous about The Force Awakens, and I'm sure some of it is just my own bias of like remembering what it felt like to have new Star Wars for the first time in a while.
Phantom Menace does the same thing for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Last Jedi does too, though.
Yeah. I cannot wait till we have this discussion. We probably won't be in it. Maybe we will. In 10 more years, because one of the greatest joys of my life, we talk about it on the show all the time, is that, you know, having been from that generation that was kids when the OT came out, then when the prequels came out and a lot of people in our generation really trash talked them, it was really fun in the last several years to see the people that were kids when those came out now be adults who are able to articulate with a lot of interesting ideas and drawing from, you know, historical myth and whatnot, talk about the prequels. And now I feel like in another 10, we're going to hit that sweet spot with the sequels where all of the things that any of us from the earlier iterations of fandom maybe didn't connect to, we're going to hear from the kids that were like, no, this brought my brain online in terms of creativity, in terms of imagination.
Yeah.
So I can't wait.
Yeah, same here. I mean, when I showed my son The Phantom Menace, which was, I've come around on that movie, and I can prove it because I co-wrote a book that's coming out this in the fall. But when I showed my son The Phantom Menace for the first time, I mean, he fell in love instantly with Jar Jar Binks. Like it was, and he loved the entire film.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, now that there are more shows, there are more movies, there are so many on-ramps to the Star Wars freeway now that I think people are coming around on the prequels more than they used to a little bit. At least I did.
Got time for another question. Anybody have a question?
When you talk about the legends being sort of shifted over, it really opens up for this new trilogy to be anything it wanted to be, and I love that. But do you have any feelings on the idea that because The Force Awakens is a love letter to A New Hope, that it just sort of kind of retreads old stuff?
I'm of the opinion that's how Star Wars works.
You're going to say the line.
It's like poetry, it rhymes.
Yeah, I don't know why. That line makes me scratchy.
I wasn't going to say it until you said that, but no, like Phantom Menace does the same thing, right? Phantom Menace echoes everything that A New Hope did, right? The scrappy young kid strong in the Force on the sandy planet gets found by a mentor and gets plucked from obscurity to go on their hero's journey, and that mentor is taken away from them too soon at the end of a red lightsaber, and then they go and fight a giant ball in space. Right? Like, that's what Star Wars in the first episode of the trilogy is in the Skywalker saga. Yeah. And I think if you go back and actually look at Clone Wars and the Mortis arc, and you see the themes of that and like that nexus of the Force play out and those ripple effects across everything, you're going to go like, oh wow, like the Force is sort of playing this out across generations in different ways, and you see different iterations of it. So yeah, like I think that's a feature, not a bug, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think even something like Rogue One that's not in the Skywalker saga is playing the same theme. It's just like in a minor key, right? Because there are a lot of really interesting inversions that happen in that movie, right? We still have instead of a villain in black that's surrounded by minions in white, we have a villain in white at the beginning of the movie surrounded by minions in black. It's not a young farm boy who wishes he could be part of something bigger. It's a young woman who was part of the bigger galaxy and now just wants some damn peace. And like, it's a really interesting thing that we're just getting different variations on that theme. Even if they seem very different initially, when you really look at them, it's like, oh, this is just, run through the reverse image ideology, which is pretty interesting.
Right even down to the color of the sand.
Yeah.
At the beginning. No, seriously. It's coarse and rough and irritating. It gets everywhere.
Although, you know what? The sand in Iceland isn't. It's like pebbly. It's not as bad. So they
So
even
it's
inverted
more
that.
coarse.
It's
Yeah.
more coarse.
More coarse, but less rough and irritating.
Yeah, so we're about out of time. Do you two want to tell folks where they can find you both at the rest of the con and in general?
Sure. Brian and I will be hosting an episode of my podcast, Stuff You Missed in History Class, later today about Kurt Vonnegut, the son of Indianapolis. And then I will be moderating the Katie Seagal panel this evening. Tomorrow, if you want to really get Star Wars geek out, Tom Spina and I are doing a panel on creating your own immersive spaces at home, because I have my own cantina, and we're going to talk about how we built that and everything that went into it. And then in Life, I won't remember the rest of my schedule. In Life, you can find me as Surly Girly 5 on Instagram, Holly Fry on Blue Sky, Stuff You Missed in History Classes, Missed in History everywhere, Criminalia, we use the hashtag Criminalia. I think that's it. I don't know. Clayton, save me.
I'll be joining these guys again tomorrow to talk about The Last Jedi, and then after that, please come join us. We'll be I'll be moderating a panel with Katie Sackhoff, Bo-Katan from The Mandalorian, and many, many other fun things. And social media-wise, Instagram at Clayton Sandell, and Blue Sky, ClaytonSandell.com, I believe. And yeah.
I'll be here doing Stuff You Missed in History Class later. Tonight I'm moderating Nick Castle's Spotlight. So he was the original Michael Myers, and he directed The Last Starfighter.
Cool.
First thing tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, I'm going to be interviewing Andy Serkis, who was Snoke and Kino Loy in Star Wars Andor. And that'll be really cool. And yeah, a whole bunch of Star Wars stuff tomorrow and Sunday across the schedule if you want to look me up there. Across social media, you can find me at Swankmotron, swankmotron.com, or Blue Sky, or Instagram, or my website, or whatever. So thank you all for coming to the first panel. Yeah, I hope you have a great show the rest of the weekend. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I'm really glad we were able to do it. You can find Holly at Surliest Girl at, on Instagram, and Holly Fry at Blue Sky, and on Stuff You Missed in History Class, and you can find both of us on Stuff You Missed in History Class this week doing our episode live from Indiana Comic-Con about Kurt Vonnegut, if you want to listen to that, which was a lot of fun. I was really grateful that she let me do a guest spot on that. And I will be at Adepticon this week in Milwaukee. If anybody wants to come see me there, I'll be doing stuff on the Catalyst Game Labs live stream and playing Battletech with folks and signing books and all kinds of interesting, neat, fun stuff. And just having a good time. So if there's any other... you can find me at swankmatron.com or at swankmatron across social media. And for Full of Sith, you can go to fullofsith.com and listen to the entire back catalog of episodes dating back the last 13 plus years. And, be sure to rate and review the show wherever it is you listen to it. We'd love that. And so, without further ado, for super producer Mike Pilot, for those joining us on the panel, for those live listening to the panel at Indiana Comic-Con, and for super producer Mike Pilot, I'm Bryan Young, and the Force will be with you always.
Sir, if you'll not be meeting me, I'll close down for a while.